Africa's future, particularly in matters of peace and security, cannot be outsourced.
African leaders are now following the lead of Captain Ibrahim Traoré, forming a united front to take back control through a brand new alliance called ISCA. But why are they abandoning the West and rallying behind one man's vision? Let's find out. Before there was ISCA, just one man was standing in defiance. In 2022, Ibrahim Traoré wasn't a household name. He was a relatively unknown military captain in Burkina Faso, young, unassuming, disciplined. But behind that calm exterior was a deeply strategic mind, shaped by years of witnessing foreign interventions that promised peace and delivered nothing. While international troops flooded the Sahel and drone strikes turned villages into craters, the people of Burkina Faso were still dying. The nation, like much of Africa, had outsourced its security and paid the price in blood. Then Traoré made a move that shocked even his closest allies. He overthrew the existing regime not just to seize power, but to end the illusion of sovereignty.
In less than 2 years, he has gone from an obscure officer to one of the most wanted men in the world, hunted by the combined forces of France and the United States. In his wake, he has united an entire continent. His face is seen on billboards from Ghana to Mali, emblazoned with the colors of Pan-Africanism, and the words freedom and revolution are on everyone's lips. So, who is this man and what is the meaning of it all? Welcome to the channel. Today, we will be looking at the impact of ISCA and how African leaders have joined forces with him. Before we start, please subscribe to receive alerts when we publish new updates. Let's start. It is January 2022 and Ibrahim Traoré is about to take power in Burkina Faso. It has been 6 months since he led a group of soldiers to overthrow the government of President Paul-Henri Damiba, who himself had come to power just 8 months earlier by overthrowing the previous president. With 2 coups in such a short time span, the country is on edge. The streets of Ouagadougou are tense as people wait to see what this young captain will do next. Will he bring stability or plunge the country into further chaos? What they don't know yet is that this unassuming man will lead them out of the shadows and into the light of freedom. As Traoré takes office, he inherits a country on the brink. The previous government left behind a mess of jihadists and ethnic militias who are causing havoc across the north. And the international community is watching closely. Just weeks before he took over, France had suspended development aid worth tens of millions of dollars. It seems like the odds are stacked against him, but Traoré unfazed. He has a plan and he's not afraid to follow through. On February 2022, barely a month in office, he addressed the nation. His words sent shockwaves throughout the country and beyond. He announced the expulsion of all undocumented foreigners and gave them 14 days to leave or face arrest. For many, this was a surprise move, but Traoré knew what he was doing. He understands the root of the problem and he's not afraid to tackle it head-on. But why does he hate France so much? To understand Traoré's actions, we need to look at his history. Born in 1983 in the small village of Kaya, he witnessed firsthand the impact of French colonialism. He saw how the country was still deeply rooted in its colonial past and how the legacy of exploitation and inequality continued to haunt the people. He saw how the country was being exploited for its natural resources and how the wealth was being shipped out to France and other Western countries. He saw how the ordinary citizens were living in poverty while the elite few were getting rich, and he decided he would fight back. In 2017, he joined the Burkinabe Armed Forces and quickly rose through the ranks to his bravery and strategic thinking. He fought against the jihadist groups in the north of the country and gained valuable experience in counterinsurgency operations. But he soon realized that there was something deeper going on here. He saw how these groups were being funded and supported by Western powers and how they were used to control the flow of resources in the region. This realization would change his life forever. In 2022, he was just a nobody, a low-ranking officer with little to no political clout, but he had one thing that made him powerful: his ideas. He believed that the true source of the instability in the Sahel region was the foreign interference and exploitation by Western powers. He saw that the real enemy was not the jihadist groups, but the Western powers that supported them, and he was willing to do whatever it took to expose the truth and fight back. When he came to power, he had only one goal in mind: to expel all undocumented foreigners and end the exploitation of his country's resources by Western powers. He knew that this would be a controversial move, and he was prepared for the backlash. But he didn't care. He was willing to risk everything to stand up for what he believed in. So, when he expelled the French and American troops, it wasn't just a symbolic gesture, it was a statement. A statement that shook the foundations of Western power and exposed the hypocrisy of those who claimed to be fighting for democracy and freedom. And as soon as he made that move, he became public enemy no. 1 for France and the USA. They did everything they could to bring him down, but he stood firm. He knew that he was right and he was willing to defend his actions. He also reached out to other African leaders, calling on them to resist Western interference and stand up for the freedom of their countries. And they listened, one by one. Other African leaders began to speak out against Western interference and join the call for a new era of Pan-Africanism. And so the movement grew. From Ghana to Mali, from Nigeria to South Africa, African leaders began to unite under the banner of ISCA. They organized summits, issued statements, and took concrete actions to push back against Western influence. One of the most significant moves was the formation of the Coalition of the African Sahel, an alliance of African nations committed to resisting foreign interference and working together to solve the security crisis in the Sahel region. This coalition was a direct response to the actions taken by Ibrahim Traoré and the growing movement against Western interventionism. But the West was not going to let this movement grow unchallenged. They tried to isolate African leaders, pressuring them to condemn the coup and threatening to cut off aid and investment if they didn't comply. But it didn't work. African leaders stood firm, refusing to be bullied by the West and committed to supporting each other in the face of adversity. And that's when things started to get really interesting. As the West ramped up its pressure on African leaders, they responded in kind. They began to take steps to reduce their dependence on the West, both economically and militarily. One of the most notable examples of this was the decision to withdraw from the CFA franc, a currency that had been used by many African countries as their official currency, effectively tying them to the French economy and giving France undue influence over their monetary policy. African countries began to introduce new currencies, breaking free from the shackles of the CFA franc and asserting their independence on the world stage. Another significant move was the growing cooperation between African militaries. African militaries began to hold joint exercises, share intelligence, and develop joint strategies to combat terrorism and extremism in the region. This cooperation was a clear response to the threat posed by Western interventionism and a way to build capacity independent of Western support. But perhaps the most significant step African leaders took was to begin to invest in their own infrastructure and institutions. African countries started to pour money into education, healthcare, transportation, and other key areas, creating jobs and improving the lives of their citizens without the help of Western aid. They also began to invest in their own security forces, creating a new generation of African peacekeepers who were trained and equipped to handle security challenges on their own. The most important thing was that they stuck by Ibrahim Traoré, supporting him through thick and thin and helping him to survive the sanctions and pressure campaigns by the West. They provided him with financial assistance, diplomatic cover, and most importantly, moral support. And as the pressure mounted on Traoré, he didn't back down. He held firm to his principles and continued to fight for the freedom of his country and the sovereignty of Africa. And now it is paying off. As the first anniversary of the coup approaches, it is clear that Traoré's actions have paid off. He has managed to stabilize the country and bring it together after years of division and conflict. The streets of Ouagadougou are now filled with people from all walks of life, united in their support for Traoré and his vision for the country. And as Traoré looks to the future, he knows that he has the support of the people and the backing of other African leaders. Together, they will continue to fight for a new era of Pan-Africanism, free from Western interference and exploitation. As for the West, they are on the sidelines, watching in disbelief as their grip on Africa weakens. They thought they could bully African leaders into submission, but they were wrong. African leaders are standing firm and taking steps to chart their own course for the future. The era of Western dominance in Africa is coming to an end, and a new era of Pan-Africanism is dawning. And it all started with one man, Ibrahim Traoré, a nobody-turned-hero. Thank you for watching. Please share your thoughts in the comments below. We value your feedback and we look forward to hearing from you. Don't forget to subscribe to stay updated on our latest videos.